What were some of the lessons that you learned in terms of understanding what money truly is?
Well, to me, it's a vehicle for freedom, but to a point where you also have a lot of people that chase money endlessly and then just fall into that trap.
I've spoken to a lot of people within AI over the last few weeks, and what is your view on it? How do you view on it? I know you guys are also looking to build within that space.
I dreamt of learning to code because I could build products, and that's how I got started coding. The struggles and hardships is actually what make the journey great, because you don't have any of this now. I'm quite fearful that civilization is going to lose a sense of purpose.
Louie Regis, the CEO at XBorg, a Web3 gaming infrastructure platform, also known as the Player Identity Protocol, built to give gamers ownership, portability, and personalization across games and esports experiences.
What are some of the fundamentals you've learned for yourself when trading to kind of keep you grounded, but also keep it as a healthy aspect of your life?
Well, trading has an expiry date, and like if you chase it too much, you'll just get wiped. Unpredictable outcome can happen at any time.
If you were to view your life in chapters, how would you tell the story of your life up until now?
Pretty deep question. I'd say...
Welcome back to the Lock-In or Log-Off podcast, where I speak to builders, creators, and investors to understand how they spotted the opportunity and how they navigated their way to success. Today, I'm joined by Louie from XBorg. How's it going, man?
Yeah, very good, very good. Thanks so much for having me.
No worries. It's good to have you on. I've been following XBorg for quite some time now, and it's been fascinating to see your guys' journey. And safe to say, you guys have pioneered in many ways across your journey. But before we dive into the XBorg side of things, I would like to go a little bit more into detail, kind of pre Web3. If you were to look at your life in chapters and as a book, how would you tell the story of your life up until now?
Yeah, pretty deep question. I'd say just before university, I was trying to... I was looking a lot of at motivational videos back then, just trying to get a sense of broader purpose. And that came in very young age, 14, 15, 16, on okay, what do I have to do in this place? Because, when you're young, a lot of people would tell you just have to go to university, get a job, etc. And I'm like, what's the sort of value that I want to create? And so quite early on, I got into building businesses. Back then when I was, so that was 10 years ago, dropshipping was a really, really early. And that's where essentially got started into entrepreneurship with Shopify store. Shopify was not so good at the time, but it was very early days there. And I would say then I created some consulting companies, some in AI, actually chatbots very early on. I think it was in 2016 roughly. And then that was, I would say, the first chapter is understanding that, okay, you can actually go outside just the boundaries of what people tell you to do, like just traditional employment. And then got into, learn about crypto and speculation. And that told me a lot about money. On everyone chases something, and that's just that currency or that money and wealth. And so crypto made me understand what it is. The speculation aspect told me to want to chase money in some sort, and then later just understand how money works. And that's how I got very interested in crypto, just because of how the wider economy works, of just printing a lot of money, and then was Bitcoin is a great hedge against that. And sort of and I also understood how the current generation is has little wealth opportunities when you look at the older generation with real estate. And I was okay, that's where I want to go. And then to learn deeper about this chapter of money, I joined some banks. So I was in Credit Suisse and then Rothschild. That's where I've learned also about myself, on inner self, about developments. What do I really want to do? Is that really pursue entrepreneurship, or is that I wanted to make sure corporate life was not for me? And I got this certainty that it was just not meant for me. But I got to learn about the system of finance. Got a lot more educated on macro and markets overall. And then, so I would say first chapter was entrepreneurship, early days. and then money, banks, and then now just going back to what I wanted to pursue initially, entrepreneurship. And so it's where I started XBorg in 2022 now.
Fascinating. I would love to go deeper into the money side of things. What are the learnings that you've had in terms of understanding what money is and how it actually works? Because I think there's actually a huge gap with most people in terms of financial literacy and actually how money works, how to accrue money, and just money as kind of a vehicle for opportunity, but also how you look to increase your financial status as such. What were some of the lessons that you learned in terms of understanding what money truly is?
Well, to me, it's a vehicle for freedom, but to a point where you also have a lot of people that chase money endlessly and then just fall into that trap. So to me, it's this sort of virtual currency where I'm truly thinking of myself as being in the game. And like you want to have a decent amount of that currency, but you don't want to chase it too much because at the end of the day, the game ends with us not being here anymore. So I think you have to understand money as a proxy for like freedom in the sense that it buys you time, but buys you peace, but you don't want to get into the game where it's just too much. And that's what I've learned about money is you can it's not very good to chase it, but you have to find that ways in which you get comfortable enough so that daily troubles, buying food or like providing for your family is not an issue anymore.
I think there's two sides of that. Obviously, it's the knowing when to stop chasing the money. But in terms of strategies to get to that initial wealth as such, in the modern day, how did you view it from a fundamentals perspective? I think a lot of people obviously speak about leverage. Naval Ravikant speaks a lot about leverage, whether it's like code, media, and everything on that front. How do you view that actual like going from 0 to 1 in the generating money?
Like creating value is my number one thing. Is at the end of the day, creating value is like providing something that others want, and that's how like it worked for centuries, and that's just what it comes down to. And so, if you're good at something and you're filling a gap of knowledge or services, then someone's going to be at the counter of this, like paying for what you're providing. And so it can be very, like you can start very easily. It could be just building websites, could be consulting. So providing services, one, I think how I got started personally was building those first businesses, but then I think real wealth creation was understanding that you have a lot of asymmetries in crypto and that you can leverage. If you work really hard, crypto is like going to 0 to 1 million, for example, crypto is the best opportunity for that. There are countless opportunities, whether that was like Hyperliquid now, like for example, you have a lot of edge on poly markets, this not betting platform, but this odds platform where you have a lot of asymmetries and inefficiencies in that market, and you'll have airdrops, etc. So I would say trying to like provide value, that's number one. But if you find asymmetries in markets, you have to jump after the opportunity and sort of going 0 to 1 really quickly.
Yeah, I think the crypto offers such a huge opportunity in terms of being able to fast track that wealth side of things, because there is like you say, the right airdrops. Even like if you're to build your own business in this industry, there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of money within this industry to be able to capitalize on. But when you mentioned that you shouldn't chase money and at some point you have to stop for the freedom, how did you decide when to stop chasing the more money?
By seeing it disappear. It's mostly, I think, I'm not going to go into the trading side of what I do, what I did, or what I'm doing, but it's is understanding that crypto is very asymmetrical. You can like extract a lot from the market, as in opportunities come to you, but if greed takes over, then you'll give everything back. And I think that's the main thing where, okay, crypto is very ruthless, and if it's an industry that provides asymmetrical opportunities, it is on both sides. So at the end of the day, you have to just call it a day and say, okay, I've made enough, and I'm actually content or satisfied. And I think at some point you just get to levels where the variance is too much to handle, and I think then it's more so physically at some point you just can't handle. When you get to a point where you start caring about markets and crypto when you sleep, and then when you're, for example, on a flight, and the only thing you want on your flight is to get Wi-Fi to check your portfolio, then you know you're getting to a point where it's hurting you more than anything. And when I got to that point, I knew, okay, I need to get out of crypto, diversify a bit. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of people, like one of the biggest struggles within crypto is one, that side, that like how much it can consume you from a full life perspective, but also I think a lot of traders lose because of the over trading side of things, and they're always ones for that dopamine hits, and they always want to be in the markets for that opportunity for gains. What are some of the fundamentals you've learned for yourself when trading to kind of keep you grounded, but also keep it as a healthy aspect of your life? Because I think it is an area that can quickly become unhealthy.
Yeah, it's to know that, one, you're lucky, and that you have, even though within yourself you're telling you have an edge, you have to keep reminding yourself that markets is just much stronger than you are, and that thing, like, unpredictable outcome can happen at any time. ETH went from like 3K to like 2K in a single day, and it just reminds you that no matter what, the market will find ways to take it away from you, and so you have to just be humble and sort of, when you're climbing mountains, like mountains are like, it's mother nature, and they will, like, if you're not paying attention, they will like take your life away. And I think of crypto as the same way. Is crypto like has sort of, well, trading has an expiry date, and like if you chase it too much, you'll just get wiped out. And I think this cycle has been great because it works in mini cycles where you have periods where you have to be active and where you just have to be just do nothing.
Yeah.
So summer last year was basically had to do nothing, and then you had to just lock in during November for the Trump elections, and then you can just rest like Feb, March, April, and then just lock in again. And now like I'm basically relaxing at the moment, so it's like not doing much.
Yeah, it's it does feel that way in terms of the cycle. Has, like you said, it's had a lot of waves within it. How are you viewing this cycle from like how it ties to the macro side of things, as well as the cycle as a whole? Because I feel like it hasn't played out as a lot of the traditional CT would have predicted. How are you viewing it?
I view 2021 as the retail bubble, and everyone got into NFTs, and so to me that was like the peak mindshare that crypto will have for the foreseeable future. And then now, as we become a lot more mature, we've got TradeFi, etc. But now it's coming back to just fundamentals, and that's why we have projects like Hyperliquid or Aave doing very well because they buy backs and they make revenues. And so I think a lot of people will come to realize that too late, but 2021 was the peak. So now just the cycle is adapting. We don't have any of the VC excess that we had in 2021, which I think will, like, the future prospects of crypto to me is very interesting because we don't have that excess that gaming tokens, for example, had. Like, I think it was the number one category of VC investments in 2021. So a big setback there, but I'm pretty bullish for the rest. So yeah, I view just fundamentals based from now on. 2021 was this peak, and it's sort of, to me, never coming back. And I think people are there's a lot of complacency on saying people are going to come back. And I think we got like a pretty good testament that it's not going to happen because we have like Circle, for example, is doing very well in TradeFi. So we know, okay, there is pool of capital that that's interested to bid crypto assets, but they just don't want to go too far out of the risk curve. And I'm not saying speculation is gone, but I'm saying that what we saw in 2021 was unprecedented. And so to some extent, I still think crypto did fairly well. Like if you look at the total market cap of altcoins, so the ones without the top 10, we almost got to the 2021 level, which I think is still decent.
Yeah, I think a lot of people crave that the 2021 NFT period because there's just so much opportunity in many ways, and you didn't have you didn't need much skill. You just participated, and there was a room to make money.
Yeah,
it was a fascinating time, but I think it has matured a lot, and I think, like you said, it's in a good way. A lot of the companies that are doing very well now have good fundamentals and are looking at actually driving revenue.
Yeah.
Which I think has been refreshing in many ways. How do you see that trend? Obviously, it's we will see that trend going forward in terms of companies that get the most support, or ones that are able to monetize and actually create businesses that drive revenue. But how do you see the landscape as a whole within crypto right now, especially for the altcoin world? Because I think there's a lot of previous coins that launched like last cycle that are still trying to push and build within this market, but the landscape has changed quite a lot.
Yeah, I think so. What's happening now behind the scene is a lot of the top 20, top 40, 50 coins have those treasury companies that are being set up. And so they're trying their best to have the TradFi ecosystem bids through proxies, and those are the treasury companies. So I see it as like you have the fundamentals, so the ones that are backed by revenues, and then you have the major tokens, like above top 50, and those will have the ETFs, they will have the treasury companies, so they will get some kind of institutional bids. They also get a lot of depth and leverage accrued, so I think this is going to unwind at some point. And then you have like the smaller caps, where it's just speculative premium, and then the memes. That's how I would boil it down to.
Yeah, and so I was listening to one of your previous podcasts, and you spoke a lot on how you view like the way you trade is you look at where the money will flow going forward and looking at those cycles as such. How do you, I think a lot of people trade in the space look at it from like what's happening right now. How do you look at it from like in the future, how it's going to cycle to new narratives, whether that's into gaming during periods, whether that's into AI during periods? How do you analyze that specifically?
Depends on the time horizon. I would say if you're looking at the next like 6 months, it's very clear that the treasury companies will lead the narrative. And I never approach very rarely do I approach markets as being directionally long an asset. I'm always delta neutral, so I'm always short other assets and long other assets. So in that sense, my views are always sort of hedged. Yeah. But treasury companies will lead the flows. You'll have the ETFs as well. So Sol is going to have its own ETF very soon. And I'm very curious to know, because to me, I view that as like the last set of marginal buyers. It's like the TradFi folks. So if you see that there is no large bid, you can pretty much call it a day on altcoins for the medium term. If you have the Sol ETF and like the first day it's just doing 50 million of volume, not volume, but of AUM, additional AUM, it's not gonna end up well. So to me, it's a sort of last test that you have for altcoins. No, I was saying that just before the podcast, but my view is that AI games and AI companies will have a lot of tokens as sort of trend of internet capital markets. And I do think that capital formation is a great thing for crypto assets. And that as we get to a phase where we can build products very easily, like you can write code products, I'm pretty confident that within the next 3 to 4 years, you'll have a very easy time building SaaS products that will make revenues, and that someone will be able to replicate your tech stack very easily. And that to bootstrap that distribution and that user growth, you will want to incentivize users and with tokens. So I do think that the landscape will change drastically, but it's going to be fueled by actual products that make revenues. And that instead of raising with equity, you just launch a token, which is a much simpler way to like get started. And then, yeah, you essentially have a ton of micro products that will be backed by tokens.
How does that work? You mentioned like the vampire attack from using tokens as such, but does that not then become cyclical where one company vampire attacks, another company vampire attacks,
Yeah.
like with beta incentives, and we just continue to see user flow across like to new apps pretty frequently? So like the expiry date for apps as such will be shorter.
Yeah, that's also my views. I think the lifespan of a game is going to be very short, or an app is going to be very short. People will just like what we see on TikTok, I think we'll see it through products. So I think a way in which you temper this is you say, okay, you have like a gaming studio, for example, that will do a bunch of games, and so you have some inflation on the token, but it's controlled and it's one asset per studio, and so it sort of preserve the IP, and I think you can reduce a bit that rotational effect. But I think it's going to come down to, it's really going to be difficult to have stickiness in your product. And my thesis is that content creators will be some of the leading product developers in the next 3 to 4 years. So people that, like, for example, IShowSpeed, I will use his, if, for example, he does a prediction market, I will use like IShowSpeed's prediction market because I just like him, and I will like get some recognition from him. I will eventually get his fan token, and I get some real value out of this. And then so it's gonna be, we're gonna continue the content creator trend. And yeah, I actually think content creators will be the biggest sort of figures around which it will be the biggest companies in the world.
That's fascinating. I was speaking to Expiry from SoFon earlier this week, and he had a very similar take of their approach of literally seeing the way that they're pushing a lot of creators, because he believes that a lot of unicorns will be born from just creator, like because of vibe coding and the ability to create apps. And they have, again, comes to your thing, like the moat is very much going to be distribution, and creators have that best distribution. I think it's fascinating in that world. But is there a world where you see, obviously we're now seeing like VOE3 from Google start to create accounts that are based around this AI and everything like that, and they're going viral. How do you see AI disrupting the content creation landscape specifically? Because I think there's obviously, they go hand in hand in one way, but the content that's now being able to be made from AI specifically is in many ways more entertaining than a lot of creators. Do you think there'll always be an element that people relate better to humans over AI, or how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I honestly don't have the answer to this. I'm more so hopeful than anything else that people will have stronger ties to humans. But I think in Asia, what you have with, I think, character AI is like people are fine actually having strong ties to bots and AIs. But my hope is that we still have actual people behind. But yeah, it's honestly very hard to predict what's going to happen there, because I'm hopeful, but I'm also very fearful that it's not going to turn out that way. You know, you have a lot of systems are getting very sophisticated now. Like, for example, KYC documents mean nothing because someone can get a deep fake of you really quickly and bypass all the KYC stuff. So I think to get the personality of the grounds, it's going to be formed by a human, but then to get it started after, it's likely going to be some kind of bots. You know, when I see, for example, Raoul Pal, the macro guy, on X, he has this the sort of his own AI version. He does videos of like daily updates, and I do think people will do like more polished content, but like the shorter form content might be just AI based. And it's definitely not going to turn out well for society, but I think we'll keep so my I would say, more polished take on that is you'll have like personalities that will do longer form content, great video, great production, and then the short term, so like short form content like on TikTok is going to be AI based.
Yeah, dominated by personalized content for your specific feed. Like the AI, the TikTok algorithm is already amazing for making it exactly what you want.
Yeah.
When there becomes a world where there's like AI can instantly distribute and create exactly what they know your dopamine receptors want, it's going to be a pretty interesting world.
Yeah.
How do you view AI as a whole? You obviously mentioned that like you want to be optimistic, but there's a world where there's still some stuff that you're fearful for. I've spoken to a lot of people within AI over the last few weeks, and it's mixed takes in terms of optimism and pessimism around the industry. And I think it's hard to predict with a technology that's progressing so quickly that we've never seen before. But what is your view on it? How do you view on it? I know you guys are also looking to build within that space. So.
Yeah. I mean, my view is AI is reshaping how we build products. I mean, more from an entrepreneurship viewpoint, is a few years ago, well, a decade ago almost now, I dreamt of learning to code because I could build products, and that's how I got started coding. But now the barriers to creating products is like super easy. You use Lovable, you use clothes, whatever, you can get a product off the ground really quickly. But I do think that the struggles and hardships is actually what make the journey great. And because you don't have any of this now, I'm quite fearful that as a whole, civilization is going to lose a sense of purpose, especially if you have UBI that gets into the equation. This like universal basic income, which what WorldCoin or World ID wants to do, is then you will struggle to find why you're here. Like when at the beginning of this podcast, I said early on I was chasing meaning in life, and if like you can build a product, it also feels pretty hopeless if you're building a product and then day two someone builds the same product. Yeah. Then you're like, what's in it for me? So I think we'll have a period of just people being pretty bored and just not knowing what they have to do in life. And I think I'm also hopeful because it's going to be a period of abundance where today we have big gaps in inequalities between countries, and I think the gap will just even out, or whether you're in Africa or Europe, granted we have UBI that will raise the standards of living in the developing countries. And assuming we have UBI and like productivity is the same across countries, then I think developed nations will have a harder time over developing nations. So yeah.
I think it's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out. And I think one of the hardest parts is the purpose side of things, because I think most people's purposes throughout life tend to be tied to money at the start. They look at many things as like an outcome for money, and that's what drives them and motivates them. Out of interest, I was speaking to Lubify around the lottery curse specifically, and you obviously done very well for yourself at a very young age. When you achieved that level of wealth that you don't have to worry as much, how did that impact purpose for you?
It's a good question. One, I'm asking myself a lot on like I'm trying to understand what exactly has changed on the grits and like trying to like go as hard as possible every day. And I have to say at some point, like you're not as stressed, and that means you're not in survival mode anymore. So the way you approach building the business is very different, where you just can take more of your time. It's not, when I was putting all my eggs in one basket of like, I have to make that thing successful, you have no plan B. Where today, my approach to building is a much more like less stressful, which is good for the business. But at times you're sometimes just wondering if that's the right thing to do. Or I could feel my productivity be much higher when I was in survival mode because I had no choice but to make it. Now I would say it's still slightly different, but like I'm still working super hard every day. It's just I do have all the like possibilities for me.
Yeah, it's that whole thing of like before you're running away from something and chasing something, whereas
Yeah.
like now it's just more focused on the chasing and you don't have to run away from
Yeah,
the need
But
for things.
it's like so today like I don't get salaries from the company. I basically do it because I like it, and that's because I would not do anything otherwise. Like I like it's I've asked myself, okay, what's next for me? But it's just like I like what I'm doing, and then it's this bigger sense that you have your whole team behind you, and then at the end of the day, you're providing value for players. I mean, that's what we do. We're helping companies like esports teams, other brands achieve better metrics, and so at some point, it's just like coming back to why you're here, and it's not because you have that currency that makes you anything special. Is you have to keep striving for, like, okay, why I'm here, and like if I look back at my life, did I provide enough value to people? And I think building a company is one way in which you can like add value pretty easily.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to see it. And I think it's great to see that you found the channel that you want to provide that value in. Pre XBorg, did you ever have a period where you were, once you had made that wealth, that you weren't sure on how to actually do that, and how did that lead to XBorg being the
No, I'm I got very fortunate during XBorg. It was like past essentially 2024. 2024 was to me a really really insane year, and as I started XBorg, chasing insane level of grit, and still, I mean, back in banks, you're making a lot, but it's nowhere near like enough for actual freedom.
yeah. How's that journey and transition been, obviously, within XBorg, and how you set off in terms of building within crypto, and when you started XBorg specifically? What is one misconception you had going into it that has now changed from your perspective?
Well, when I started XBorg, revenue considerations were different. It was like you're still like 2022, you're still off of the 2021 cycle, and you're like, okay, there will be a lot of speculation premium, and the way businesses were to function is, okay, I'm gonna make revenues, but only by selling my own token. And I came into XBorg thinking, okay, we're gonna provide a lot of value, and it's gonna be a lot of research and development. It's gonna be very innovative, and revenue will not come into the equation really quickly. But that quickly shifted, like 2022, bear market, 2023 as well. And then the way the altcoin market shaped up, it was clear that, okay, that's not going to work out. And so my perception was that it's fine just innovating and doing research and development, but for a token of our size, so we're in like the small caps, mid caps, it became very clear that, okay, we have to focus really on revenues really quickly. And yeah, that's been my perception. In a sense, like in the last like 2 or 3 years, crypto has really moved towards fundamentals. And at the end of the day, I just came to understand really quickly that any business that's not making revenues will die. And crypto or not, it's the same. Like, could be applied to Ethereum as well. Could be applied to Solana. Bitcoin is different because you have no OPEX, but if Ethereum is not making money on a long enough time frame, it's gonna die.
Yeah. How have you looked to implement that for XBorg specifically? Obviously, a lot of companies, that's the ideal world, but it can be difficult.
Yeah, so for us, it's like knowing where to focus. And quite early on, we had a lot of traction on esports teams. So just going back to what we do, we're building like an identity layer for gamers. So it's essentially that passport that carries your game data. And we have different ways of getting the data. One is the fan apps that we build for gaming brands, esports. And so we happen to monetize that really quickly with our first team. And then we saw that's where the traction was, and that's where the interest was from enterprises and brands. And so that's where we got like the bit of traction initially. And I said, okay, we have to double down there. We could have gone very different ways. We could have said, okay, we go decentralization routes and say we're going to build the blockchain really early on and have a lot of overhead there. But I said, okay, if things continue to shape the way I see them, revenues will matter a lot more. And so we have to just focus on that, on revenues. And very fortunate to have a great team. João, our BD guy, is great. Like is crazy. He's doing insane work, and the whole product team is also great. So now we have that SaaS that we're operating. So basically selling to brands our tech stack. That's Web3 powered. Like you have a lot of Web3 capabilities, but today we work with some of the largest brands in the world. We'll announce very shortly one Fortune 500 company that joined our tech, and yeah, very happy for this.
What does the reception look like from the companies you've been working with? Where does the value that they see, is that the relationship that they're able to build with their established communities and have deeper insights, or where does the direct value accrue to them specifically?
I would say it's just above par tech stack. Is they have so those fan apps, like, so as we said, like communities and content creators is where the value is. I mean, the value of a content creator lies in the value of the community, like the follower base. And so this applies to content creators, and we work with some, but it also applies to brands. Like your brand equity, let's say we live in that era where the products can be created really quickly, then what's going to make, and that was the original idea of XBorg, but what makes people stick is a sense of belonging in a community. And this app, well, this stack is right in the middle, where it's meant to empower the people of your community. Also works on retention, acquisition of new members. And biggest brands in the world see that. And today we just came to a stage where our solution is above par vs what the market offers. And yeah.
Very, very exciting. Yeah, I think the value of communities and being able to, because there is just so much opportunity now for people, for different entertainment, different communities to feel like they belong to. So it's highly competitive in the way of being able to retain your community members, both in Web3, but also in Web2. It's only going to become more competitive. So it's interesting to see that that's kind of the solution that you guys have come up with. But outside of that, you guys obviously are also coming to market with XBorg AI. Are you able to go into a little bit more detail of what that looks like?
Yeah. So we were super focused on building that product. So the fan app stack, like laser focused last year or so, saying, okay, we want to bring this to above par. We want to make revenues, and it's sort of our, safety cushion with a bear market or whatever, because we're not cyclical in that sense. Like actually, when you had some market downturns, revenue hasn't, like, nothing shifted from a revenue POV. But then, I'm an entrepreneur. Like, I want to build actual stuff and innovate. And so to me, it was hard a bit to see just, okay, we have the SaaS products and that's working well, but I want to keep innovating. And I have such a strong thesis on AI that to me, we need to build capabilities around AI within the company. And so it was saying, okay, we don't want to take away too much of the resources of XBorg, but we want to innovate with essentially a lab that creates products around AI that's intertwines with the current products that we build at XBorg. And so it's you have to think of it as a sort of side venture. Today it's 100% funded by me, so we don't take any of the treasury of the company. And so we're building this team that's pretty agile, that will ship product very fast. There are different angles to it. For example, on the fan app, we have a companion. It's an avatar that you can create. And so, we've discussed about this ISO speed and like content creators, and I think there's a world where the avatar that we create for the content creators or the brand, they can speak to you, you can interact with them, they can give you tips and advices. And so we will bring AI capabilities to our fan apps. The other thing that we've also noticed is that trading crypto is a big thing. Like, it's probably just one of the few product market fit. You also have stable coins, etc. But for now, trading is a big thing. And we're also very big on Hyperliquid. I mean, we really, I've mentioned one tweet, like one TG for the whole cycle, and I was on my tweet where I said Hyperliquid is the one you need to look at. I'm a product user, etc. And so XBorg's first product is built on top of Hyperliquid, and we will bring a gamified trading experience to Hyperliquid. So it's this custom UI that is also like AI powered with recommendation suggestions. And our goal is to help people navigate crypto smarter. And it's very different than gaming, but we still bring the gamified aspect to the table.
Is it more in the world of like the DeFi/AI world where it's like the hey anons? I know Cerebro are coming into a similar world where it's gives you in like AI helps you make more intellectual decisions like for the trades themselves. What kind of information does it look to help people with?
Yeah, basically a lot of people got the altcoin market wrong. And again, I think there are a lot of people are very wishful and complacent, thinking that I'm early enough, so I just hold and that's it. But it was something that worked in 2021, but this is not going to happen for the next years or so. And so we basically want to get that tool that is giving it so that it gives you some kind of edge on the market. So it gives you sentiments on like wider like macro, but like also on X specifically. It tells you what's the relative positioning of people on the markets, and like for example, I have this group or on it's a Discord community where I'm saying, okay, you have to bet on I said in April you have to bet on Hype and Altcoin, and those are like the two leaders. And so basically creating that tool that can help you dissect those leading narratives.
How does it identify those leading narratives? Because that's easier said than done.
Yeah, so yeah, it's interesting. I think Hype to me was trying to understand, and I think it's also has to do with time in the market. But you know that in every periods of drawdown, people come back to fundamentals because that's the only thing that can attach themselves to some kind of valuation. And so my view was that should we have a drawdown, and we had this drawdown in Q1, I was like, what's going to outperform on the way down and eventually on the way up as well, because in crypto you have this thing where relative performance is also a great indicator of future performance. And just like you had Rollbit, for example, in 2023 that did pretty well because of how much revenues they were making. And I said, it's very likely that this test is also takes place on Hype, because people just come back to fundamentals, and Hype, like Hyperliquid was doing at the time like 200-300K buybacks.
Yeah.
And so I thought that this was going to happen. And then Altcoin is a lot more speculative, but it's about mindshare and volume. And so when you have peak lack of disinterest in crypto, and you look at what's doing most volume, it's also telling you what's going to lead. And overall, when you look at the periods of drawdown are the best to capture what's going to, like, what persists in terms of volume and mindshare, and on the way down is going to do very well on the way up. And that's exactly what happens to Altcoin, or even, that's silly, when I look at this podcast in like 2-3 years, Altcoin is going to be at zero, that's for sure. But in the current markets, it's just where the flows are at. And yeah.
With tools like this though, if so many people are using them, does that not reduce the edge?
Yeah.
Because then everyone's then making the same decisions off the same, like similar tips.
Yeah, that's the one of the issue with the tool. But you can think as per the value that you create, you can just price higher so that just you don't erode the edge, and it's just less people that have access to the product.
Interesting. Yeah, because I think that's broadly speaking, I think there's going to be a lot of AI tooling that comes out that looks to even the playing fields. But even in the playing fields, there has to be winners and losers at some point. So it's like, how does that edge maintain to everyone? Is an interesting.
Well, I mean, the way I look at markets in the next like 2-3 years is going to be a lot of AI driven. You have a lot of, for example, now you have like an app where you can do screenshots of a setup. So you have like an hourly candle, a 4-hour candle, whatever, and then you just put this on the website and it gives you some setup. So it defines the risks that you can take, defines the patterns, and so I think stocks and crypto is going to be a lot more technical, like because it's going to be most of it just going to be AI powered. And I think what we just discussed on like hype and Thoughtcoin, trying to understand this is going to be very. I think this will erode in the next 2-3 years, just because AI is going to control the flows very much. So I think if you have some AI systems that tell you to go risk off.
Yeah.
I think there is a world in the next like 2-3 years where markets will go down and people will say it's because this AI system says it's going to be time to go.
And everyone then sells off because of it.
Yeah, because everyone will just follow that system. But I do think that the day you have the big ETFs or just asset managers that use AI systems and they all replicate the same formula, then you'll have it's going to be very reflective flows on the way up and down.
AI is obviously an amazing tool that a lot of people are using now for, like you say, it can be for trading, can be for their day-to-day work. How do you see the balance of, like, AI is obviously so powerful, but I think it obviously then just pushes the spectrum of people who have critical thinking further away.
Yeah.
They become very dependent on AI and like that is the source of truth. Yeah. How do you see that playing out?
It's interesting. My brother just in France you have those preparatory classes that's for 2 years, really really tough, and then you go to business schools or engineering schools. And I was telling him you have a real edge because you've developed your critical thinking, and then you've actually gained a lot of knowledge. Because I think this will erode. Like, why would I learn math is if every question that you have can be answered in a second with Claude or any LLM. So I think we'll have less and less critical thinking, and then when I see some behaviors of people not being able to write emails, or when I see, for example, the Meta Ray-Ban glasses.
Yeah.
When you go and visit new places, you can ask, like, give me information about that. But I think knowledge retention is going to be decreasing more and more, and just people will just lack critical thinking. And I think an edge you have is going back to the fundamentals of I was questioning for a lot of time like educational system in France of like those preparatory classes, but I do think in hindsight it's actually a blessing because they've learned those between 18 to 20 years old, you've learned that critical thinking is very important. And I hope that the younger generation will still be pushed to learn new things. But I still like, I see it for me as well. Like, instead of doing a lot of research, I was helping someone for a panel discussion, and like I would have researched a lot a few years back, but now I can just ask Claude on like. And I'm sure, for example, for your podcast or interview, you can feed the AI the content. It will just give you questions, and so you don't think anymore. But I do think sometimes in the near future, meaning to life is also going to come to like knowledge and critical thinking. Is going to be very important.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how people navigate the world of AI as it becomes a world where it's like in many ways it always has the right answer, so you become dependent on that as a source of truth. But as we come towards the end, I'd like to kind of cover a few topics, and that is, what is there? Obviously, you mentioned XBorg AI, but over the next 6 months to a year, what is there to look forward to for XBorg?
Yeah, a lot of team announcements, a lot of brands. So doing that, I would say, boring stuff of you have a product that works, you just scale it to businesses and you ship features that the businesses want. And so our goal is profitability by year end. So we want to make sure that we are very comfortable on that end, and then working on XBorg AI otherwise. So today, the strategy is very simple. Boring business. XBorg AI is more the innovative side of things. And we're putting on the side decentralization. So we're openly saying that we had much earlier plans of building the blockchain and posting all the data that we collect on chain. It's just not the right time in the market. Again, we want to seize that opportunity to be to gain momentum in the fundamental space, and we're well on our way to get there. And then we could talk about more like the token utilities, etc. But I think to me, it just comes down to fundamentals. And the more revenues we make, the better off we'll be as a company, but also as a token, because we'll have the ability to buy back the token on the market eventually.
Is that the plan then, to kind of go down that same flywheel of like, as you become profitable, driving the value back to the token?
We've actually, like, early on we were meant to raise a very large equity rounds. But we've said if we were to do an equity round, that means we don't value the token. And I think being in crypto, like having both equity and token is super hard. You can't jungle the two. What we're seeing with the treasury companies is people like build stocks as proxies, but they flow the value back to the token in some ways. And we don't want to give any of the value to equity holders. So we openly saying, like, we have two shareholders today, it's myself and XBorg, and we're 100% aligned on the fact that tokens gets all the value. So we want to, we can't give dividends too early, just like any tech stocks, but it's going to go back to token holders.
As you scale. Very, very exciting. And one other question as we come to the end is, what's one resource that has been most impactful to you throughout your career, whether that is a podcast, a quote, a perspective on life?
I like a guy very early on, David Laroche, is a French motivational speaker. I would say sort of equivalent of, is it Robbins?
Tony Robinson.
Tony Robbins, yeah. And I used to listen to him because early on it was trying to understand like what makes us unique. I mean, what makes life unique, etc. And I was not depressed. I was just trying to seek the truth on like where I'm at. And I think this is exactly what got me into entrepreneurship, on like trying to build stuff. And I think, life would have been very different without him. But it was more like this state of mind on like, even early on, like David Goggins and all that stuff. Like I used to look up to these guys. And it just got you started. And I think I got I've built a lot of stuff very early on, and that gave me an edge for the rest. Like, when you make money quite early on, then you become more comfortable, and then people look up to you, and then you can invest into projects. And then, you start from attending competition, or the startup competitions, to organizing your own, and then you build a network. And so getting that edge very early on was a huge help to me.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. Very similar. I was very inspired by all the motivational stuff and everything like that. But how do you see, like, obviously motivation is very short-lived. It's not something that you're always going to feel motivated every single day. Obviously, when you find your purpose and something that you love, there's a little bit of an edge on that front. But how did you find that relationship? I think there's a lot of value within it. But I think, especially now with TikTok and Instagram, a lot of people they thrive with like the dopamine hit of watching the motivation stuff instead of actually taking action after.
I've always worked pretty hard, but to me, it was like, I was watching those motivational videos almost on repeat, and I was just grinding. And I think there is this thing where the hardest part in any new habit is like the first 20 something days, and it's just, you just get your ass off the ground for 20 days, and then it just gets a lot easier. And then, yeah, motivation means nothing if you don't have consistency and like constant practices. It's the same with sports. You know, I was in a pretty disastrous health last year, and then did a marathon in May this year. I was just like it's you just do it every day. Like you just train every day, and then it's you just do it.
You learn that habit of what happens when you stick to something for a long enough period, and you can take it to different aspects of your life, whether it's health, sports.
But at the end of the day, look at life as like you have an expiry date, and so it's like if you want to rest, you'll be able to rest at the end, peacefully. But like while you're at it, it's like anything that's my philosophy is saying if I don't provide value, I'm essentially useless. And that means whoever put me on that world, must not be very proud of me. And that sort of haunts you every day. It can be very toxic, but then if you want to just provide value, then whatever wealth you have, then you just have to keep pursuing it. And it's sort of this endless pursuit where I'm on today. So yeah,
it's a beautiful pursuit in many ways. I think it's if you have the right perspective on how to handle that pursuit and that philosophy, I think it is very empowering in many ways. Mm-hmm. But thank you very much, Louie, for coming on. I'm very excited for what you guys have to come, but also some amazing insights for the audience and also for myself.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for having me.